Hi, my name is Phil and I'm bringing this old canoe stern motorboat back to life. Her name is Jabiru, she's 32 feet long, 90 years old, and I'm having fun doing this. So about 2 years ago I ran the engine and I wanted to see if it was in good enough condition to consider putting it in the boat, because in order to put it in the boat I have to make new engine beds the right width for this engine. So I decided to go ahead and use the engine, so I've put new engine beds in and it's all ready to go in. So I'm now going to put the engine back together, clean it up, paint it, and make sure that it's all okay. And that's what this episode is going to start dealing with, so hope you enjoy it. Well, good morning. I've got a little bit more news this morning. Yesterday I found another D35 BMW diesel on Marketplace, so I went and bought it. It looks like it's a slightly younger engine than the other one that I have. I don't know if you can see that there, but it has a lot less corrosion on it, although it still has corrosion in various places. It has got the original cooling hoses on it, which is really nice compared to the other one that I had. It has no loom, and I don't know if you can see in there, but the plug appears to be damaged. I haven't tried to connect it up yet. Now, the one thing I did find was that the gearbox went in and out of gear, which is fine, but big problem, or before I get to the big problem, the wiring and everything on the engine looks a little bit neater, a bit more tidy than the engine I already have. So the huge problem that I found when I looked at it, although I'll mention this one first, the cover over the stop button, which is supposed to be on here and pulls out to stop the engine, that cover's not cracked like it is on the original engine. So but the throttle linkage is totally jammed and the crankshaft is seized. So what I'm going to do is take out the two injectors and fill up the cylinder with both the cylinders with penetrating oil and see if I can get the engine unstuck, because I wouldn't mind getting it to run and just compare it to the other engine. There's a lot of things about this engine that are neater. What is another good thing about this engine is that it has the correct alternator on it. So the one that I have had an addition to this, which made it, well, I'll show you that anyway. But this, provided it works, I guess, will be a better setup to have in the boat. Got a few other things wrong with it. There is a bit of corrosion down in here, but I can't see that it's actually rusted through anything yet. So it does look a bit messy though. So time will tell. Also, the engine's been dropped on this pulley, so there's a big dent in it there, but the one on the other engine's good. The heat exchanger and manifold system looks a lot less corroded than on the other engine. I've decided to refer to the two engines as number 1 and number 2. I spent some time removing the injectors from number 2 so I could flood the cylinders with a mixture of penetrating oil and acetone in the hope of freeing up the pistons without the need to remove the cylinder head. All this was to no avail, and number 2 engine remained seized. When the injectors were finally removed, I used high pressure air to clean out any debris and was confronted with a cloud of aluminium oxide. It looked very dry down inside there. It seems the best plan is to use number 2 engine as spares for number 1, which I know to be healthy. On number 2 engine, the alternator is seized solid and so is useless to put on number 1. The alternator on number 1 engine is the wrong type, so I'll have to buy a new alternator. There are 3 heat exchangers on this engine, and these all have salt water running through them. The first is a pipe through the gearbox to cool the transmission oil. Then the salt water goes through the oil cooler then through a heat exchanger in the lower part of the exhaust manifold, and this keeps the freshwater cooling system at the proper running temperature. After that, the salt water enters a jacket around the exhaust pipe and finally into the exhaust hose and out to sea again. These are the parts of the oil cooler that was on the seized engine. I've cleaned them up in some strong vinegar, and I've just cleaned this one with some thinners. I've had this heat exchanger in vinegar overnight, and you can see that those holes are all nice and clear now. Now this is similar to what the one looked like that I did yesterday. The one from the seized engine looked in similar condition to this. Pretty messy. So I'm going to take that out and put it in vinegar overnight and see how that one cleans up. I think it'll be okay though. Looks good. Just thought I should show you this. When I went to take the hose off, this fitting just fell apart. So we were that close to having a cooling system that would have stopped working. Would have been marvellous, wouldn't it? So I'll have to either fix that or use the other oil cooler, one of the two. But it looks pretty clogged, doesn't it? So we'll have a look and see what that looks like after a night in the vinegar. I'm using the same vinegar cocktail that I used on the other heat exchanger for the other so there we go. You can see that that's starting to clean up already on the oil side, but on this side it's going to take a little bit longer. So I'll leave that in there. What I did with the other one was I used a piece of welding rod and I just poked through every hole after it had been in the acid for 24 hours. So I'll leave it at that. Smells pretty potent. It's actually 90% acetic acid, and I've added about 50% water, so it's probably a 45% solution of acetic acid. So something you wouldn't want to leave this in there for too long. It might start eating it all away.
I cleaned the heat exchangers in both of the oil coolers and they both look in good condition. I chose the best looking set of parts to reassemble the oil cooler to go back on engine number 1. So I've now got a pile of spares, including a good heat exchanger if I ever need it. Before refitting the oil cooler onto the engine, it needs to be painted, as does the engine behind the oil cooler, so that'll go later on. The next job is to remove the exhaust manifolds on both number 1 and number 2 engines to see which one is best to use. This was a mammoth task which totaled about 7 hours of struggle on my part. As I tried to remove the studs, I found that they were all corroded and in effect were glued to the aluminium manifold. On engine number 1, several studs broke free and were able to be withdrawn, but 2 would not move. They were so tight, the studs broke off at the base of the nuts. Eventually, with lots of leverage, threads in the cylinder head broke free and were stripped. About maybe 8 or 9 millimeters of thread was stripped out of the cast iron head.
Wow.
This left the studs effectively welded to the manifold. With much hammering, they were finally freed. They were so difficult to move that I even started to rivet a head on the stud before it started to move, and then had to grind it back to a parallel surface so that it would actually move through the manifold when I hammered it out. Once all the studs were removed, I was able to run a 10mm drill through the holes in the manifold to give the original clearance. This was the same on both number 1 and number 2 engines. I only showed the removal of the manifold from number 1 engine, but number 2 was about the same amount of trouble. cleaned up both heat exchangers in vinegar as I did with the oil cooler. I tested the thermostat in warm water before I put it back into the engine to make sure that it was opening properly, and it seems to be working well, so I'm going to leave that old thermostat in there, and I'll just keep my eye on the temperature as the engine runs. I'm removing this drain plug because as with everything else on this engine, if there's a bit of steel against aluminium, it's usually corroded in place. So I'm removing them, cleaning the threads, and then putting some rescue steel on the studs that go back in, or the plug in this case, so that in future the bond between the bare steel and the bare aluminium will be shrouded in rescue steel, so I'll be able to remove them again. It'll just make life easier working on this engine in the future, although I hope I never have to do that. The next step is to sandblast and paint the manifolds, choosing the best one to fit the number 1 engine. As with the oil cooler, the engine behind the manifold has to be painted as well as the back of the manifold before I can replace it, so that's what I'll be doing. So I ended up using the manifold and the oil cooler both from the number 2 engine, the seized one, as they were in much better condition. So that's where we're at now. Well, I've removed all of the wiring loom to make this easier to clean. I've removed the oil cooler and all the hoses, and I've started removing the front here. I've taken the water pump off, and I'm about to clean this. Well, I think actually I've cleaned that yesterday. I'm going to take off the engine stop. This is interesting. The manual doesn't show a manual engine stop, but this one's got one on it. So if you pull that, the engine stops. Also, if you press the stop button on the dashboard, on the control panel, this solenoid actually works and the engine stops from that end as well. So I guess this is a standby thing that you can get your hand into the engine box and shut off the engine by using that. So I've got to take that off and this off, and take off this. You might remember when I ran the engine, I had to actually plug this up with some glue because it was leaking oil all around here. So it's pretty messy, that timing cover. I'm going to take it off and replace it with the other timing cover. This has turned into another lengthy video, so I'm going to stop here. The next episode will continue with more of getting the engine together, and it may just take 1 episode, or it could take 2, who knows. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.